Coming up first on this list of alien abductions today is going to be Antonio Villas-Boas. I probably pronouncing that wrong, I'm gonna be honest, should have looked it up before. A Brazilian man who became infamous in 1957 when his alleged story of an alien encounter rocked our understanding of this world. According to his account, he was working on his family's farm near São Francisco de Sales when he observed a bright red object in the night sky. As this object approached, Boas claimed it changed color to orange and then landed on the ground. He described it as looking like a metallic egg-shaped craft with rotating lights on top. Reportedly, 4 small beings emerged from the craft. Humanoid, grayish blue skin, the classic like little gray alien that you always see. These beings took him aboard their craft, they took samples of his DNA, and also, if you believe what he said, they said that they had a mate with one of their more attractive female humanoid aliens. After a beautiful night, Boas claimed that he was released and watched as the craft took off and disappeared into the night sky. He reported experiencing physical symptoms afterwards, including nausea and weakness. Now, initially, Boas would keep this to himself. It's embarrassing to tell your friends you kissed an alien, I guess. Eventually, though, he would share his story in 1958, contacting a journalist and gaining widespread attention from media all over, all the way up to top 5 scary YouTube videos. And if you're looking for way more stories about alien abduction, like I just said, top 5 scary is kind of the name in that. Click on through, we have got videos on every subject you could possibly think up that's creepy and crawly. So hit subscribe, make sure to hit that bell as well so you don't miss a single scream, but if you would be so kind, do that at the end of this video because I got 4 more stories of alien abductions coming up for you right now.
A Christmas abduction. Our first tale comes from a woman who claims that one Christmas day she did not receive her 2 front teeth or a hippopotamus, but was instead abducted by beings from another world. This is her story. I saw a UFO in 1978 on Christmas Day. My mom and dad saw it also. I was so excited as a 12-year-old child that I went to sleep on the top bunk bed and dreamed that I was being lifted up on a craft. My body couldn't move as I was being lifted in a force field. Upon entering the craft, I could feel my body begin to move again. I was covering my eyes and I felt 2 taps on my shoulder. I turned around and it was 3 of them. One was female. She said, "Don't be afraid. We are not going to harm you. We only chose you because we knew you were more curious than afraid." They showed me all around the craft. The floors were made of cushions. They explained that they fly with their mind and manually. I asked if I could fly it. They said that I wouldn't comprehend their technology. I said I could learn. They replied that I would have to erase everything that I learned on Earth first. Then I would have to learn their history and technology. They taught me how to communicate with them with my mind and how to fast forward psychically. For example, one day we will be communicating with other worlds to help us live longer, and they would teach us how to build a craft that will take us to other planets. It is really too much to write, but just sharing my special dream. I asked them if I will remember this. They said, when I grow up 40 or 50 years later, I will remember this as if it happened yesterday. Every feeling and emotion. She said it's a technology of theirs that's called reverse memory. I never told anyone this story other than my family. I figure I'll share it here.
Number 4, Yafit Cado. Yafit Cado is an American actor. He's most known for Live and Let Die, but he is far more famously known as Parker in Ridley Scott's 1978 masterpiece Alien. Perhaps then that it's a bit ironic, or it's perfectly fitting, that he has been encountering aliens since he was young. Cado believes in aliens, alongside seeing aliens, and has even claimed to have made direct physical contact and held an alien. Speaking out for the first time ever about this in 2017, Cado told Vice News about his experiences. He said it began in his youth when he was staying home one day looking out at the streets of the Bronx, New York, watching people play stickball. He turned around and there was a humanoid figure that stood 5 or 6 feet tall with an elongated head which disappeared. Pretty sad, because Cado would spend a lot of his life pursued by aliens with elongated heads on board the USS Nostromo. He claimed that over the next 50 years he was continuously monitored. He described one scenario where coming home and then going into his garage to meditate, he saw something shining ethereally bright. He says that there were things flying over his house, wouldn't call them aircrafts, but entities. He said that every time he would move to a new house, there would be a ring of smoke that would be present when he moved in. Now, the most outlandish claim was that while visiting the Philippines, Cado claims he saw a UFO the size of Yankee Stadium flying over an office he was staying at following that same circle of smoke. Now, there's not really any recordings or sightings of a gigantic UFO in the Philippines around this time, so kinda have to wonder. Now, Cado claims to have an IQ of 196 and describes himself as being mentally stable. Who isn't? And was wary to talk about any of his paranormal experiences for fear that people would dismiss him for his connection to the Alien movies. So what do you think, my fair viewers? Is it too much of a cosmic coincidence? Or was it perhaps destiny that an actor famous for being tangled with aliens was pursued by them in real life? Maybe he was just getting really into the role, doing that like Jared Leto method acting research and thought that to play a guy hunted by aliens, he should be hunted by aliens in real life. Number 3. Linda Napalitano. Linda Napalitano, also known as Linda Quartile, is a woman who claims that she was abducted by aliens in New York City in 1989. Even aliens can't resist the allure of the Big Apple. Gotta come check out Lady Liberty. Her story has become one of the most famous, but also controversial alleged alien abduction stories. Now, according to how Miss Napolitano tells it, she was asleep in her 12th floor apartment in Manhattan when she was suddenly awoken by a very blinding bright light. She claimed then that she saw 3 small beings with big pale gray skin and large black eyes that levitated her out of her bedroom window and into a waiting nearby UFO up above. She described these beings as very humanoid and looking about 4 feet tall, another example of those classic little gray aliens like we mentioned in the first point. Napolitano reported that she was taken to a room on the craft where she was examined by these beings. She said that she was taken to a council room where she saw several humanoid-esque beings who were running the thing, sort of administrative, seemed like a captain or commander type. Napolitano claimed that these beings communicated with her telepathically, and they told her that they were from a far off planet called Serpo, and were conducting experiments on humans to understand our physiology as we were a bit new to them. Okay then, it's completely reasonable, no cause for any alarm. Take a couple fingernails, take some spit, take some hair, take whatever you need. Now, Napolitano's alleged abduction got her quite a lot of attention because it's a fantastical story and a wild depiction of an abduction, and her story was featured in major news outlets and even a book detailing what happened. Now, obviously there is some skepticism if Napolitano is just telling a tall story to get a little attention, but over the years she has maintained that what happened to her was the good and honest truth, and has since become a fairly notable figure in the UFO communities sharing her story. Number 2. Boriska Kyrianovich. Boriska Kyrianovich is a Russian man who gained attention due to his claimed extraordinary abilities and also his alleged memories of his past life on Mars when he was a Martian. Born on January 11th, 1996 in Volsky, Russia, Boriska started attracting media attention from a fairly early age. According to Boriska, he began speaking very shortly after his birth. Babies don't usually do that. He displayed exceptional intelligence and knowledge beyond his years, claiming that they stemmed from his previous life when he lived on Mars. And he shared details about his Martian life, its civilization, and its advanced technology. According to Boriska, if you were expecting the Martians, you're out of luck because they've already come and gone, claiming that the Martians were a highly advanced society that was devastated by a cataclysmic event thousands of years ago and have since been wiped out. He claimed that Martians possessed a deep understanding of spiritual concepts, had far longer lifespans than humans, and had technology infinitely more advanced than ours. They probably also have some pretty cool movies. It makes sense then that Elon Musk wants us to get back out there so bad. Come check out some of the wreckage of their cool society. While some people found Boriska's story intriguing and considered it evidence of reincarnation or extraterrestrial contact, others remain, I think, a little healthily skeptical. For one thing, I didn't know you could reincarnate from like a different planet. I thought you had to reincarnate on the same planet, but I guess not. It's definitely fantastical, and until we can actually get up to the surface of Mars, it's going to be pretty difficult to confirm or deny if there really was a society that existed there previously. Now, it should also be noted that as the years have gone on, Boriska has spoken out less and less about his past life as a Martian prince, and there have been a lot fewer updates on him overall, which definitely lends a teeny tiny bit of skepticism. It does make you wonder if maybe the whole story was just a young person making something up, which I've never heard of something like that happening, so I don't know. Number 1, David Huggins. Oh, David. We've talked about Mr. Huggins before on the channel, and I'm talking about Mr. Huggins again because he's one of my favorite abduction stories. I saved the best for last. David Huggins is a painter who claims that he has been abducted by aliens multiple times throughout his life. They just could not get enough lovin' of Huggins. His first account happened when he was young, and he reported that he saw a UFO hovering over a nearby field, and a humanoid figure appeared down from the craft, blessing Huggins by telling him telepathically that he would have a special mission to fulfill in life. Of course, he had no idea what the special mission was at the time, and if he did, maybe he would not have been as excited. Over the years, Huggins claims that he had several encounters with these alien humanoids who had blessed him. He describes them as being tall and thin, and with large heads and large eyes. Now, he says these beings have taken him aboard their craft and shown him a number of things, including the creation of the universe, the future of the human race, how they get caramel inside chocolate bars without there being a hole, all sorts of wondrous things. Now here's where things get interesting and a bit difficult to talk about with content guidelines, because Huggins claims that as a part of fulfilling this galactic destiny that he's gone for a few rolls in the hay with aliens, and that he's fathered several alien human hybrids with the extraterrestrials, and my mom watches these videos, so I'm sorry if I'm struggling. Inspired by these momentous events, Huggins painted his truth, rather directly influencing his artistic career, with most of his paintings depicting humanoid beings and UFOs hanging out. His paintings are actually visible in the Visionary Art Museum in Baltimore if you're up near there and want to check them out sometime. They're really cool. They are definitely not safe for work unless your work is my work, at which case looking at pictures of aliens kissing is my work and my passion. Do what you love and you never work a day in your life, and I have never worked a day in my life.
Number 4, the Sacramento Abduction. This next story is from an anonymous Reddit user who claimed to be abducted and experimented on by aliens before waking up at home with injuries related to the experiment. As he told the story, in July of 2015, back when I was 19, I lived in a house in Southport, Sacramento, with 3 other friends. I woke up one night to a light coming through the ceiling of my room, and it lifted me out of my bed. Next thing I know, I'm in some kind of chair and unable to control my body like I had been given something. There were guys that were not human men, but gray people with large black almond-shaped eyes doing stuff with what seemed like medical instruments and machines. I was very terrified. I was unarmed, naked, and unable to move. I was so scared. One of them was touching the machine that put a tube down my throat and into my stomach. His hand got close to my face because he had to adjust something holding my head in place. I remember getting a good look at his hand and eyes. They had long fingers with pads at the tips, sort of like salamanders do. Their skin is gray, but kind of like a powdery translucent gray. They had large heads with small necks. So small and thin, it didn't make sense. Their arms and fingers were long and skinny too. I was in a chair with my head and jaw held by something, so I didn't see their feet. I'd say the tallest probably stood about the height of my lowest rib, and for reference, I'm 5'10". The tube machine sucked out the food I ate earlier that day, and then was pulled out of me. I don't remember how I got there. But then I remembered being in a cage made of some kind of metal that reminded me of aluminum in a room with curved walls. In front of me was a man who looked a lot like a human, talking to a gray person on a window that lit up as a screen, like a hologram, but not like the Star Wars kind, more like a video call. The man was tall and looked like a human, except that his skin was very white and his hair was blonde and platinum. I've never seen a person that kind of snow-white skin color before. He spoke with a gray person on the holoscreen in a language I didn't understand. He wore a blue flight uniform of some kind. The man was obviously military of some sort, judging by his uniform. The gray person spoke in a language that sounded like birds chirping. Once the call was over, the holoscreen turned into a different display with symbols, and the man turned and walked to me. He crouched down and spoke to me in plain American English and said to me, "Everything's gonna be fine. I'm going to get you out of here and take you home." I was so happy to hear that. He opened the cage, and the next thing I knew, I fell on top of my bed with my back hitting the mattress first. I immediately got out of bed right after I fell. Number 3. Too close encounters, too furious. Next, we have a story from a woman who claims that she was visited by aliens as a child, but not believed. Years later, she had a second encounter that solidified the experience as truth in her mind. As she tells it, "My first experience happened when I was a child, living in a small town in Texas, in a house on a few acres of land for horses and cattle. I wasn't allowed to watch very much television, so I'd never heard of nor seen anything about UFOs or aliens before in my life. Until one night I found myself out in the field standing in front of a spaceship. And there was a being in front of me. Behind it stood the open hatch of a light-filled door. I do not remember how I got there or back inside. I have also forgotten what, if anything, was said or done to me at the time. When I spoke about it, I was reprimanded harshly and told I had an overactive imagination and it was only a dream. When I insisted on repeating my story, I was punished. They demanded to know where I'd seen such a thing, and the little television I was allowed to watch became much smaller, to the point where mentioning what had happened only brought negative consequences. So I stopped talking about it. Despite this, it remains forever in my memory. One night in early 2004, I was home alone at my apartment in Houston, Texas. As usual, I fell asleep on the couch in front of the television. Shortly after drifting off, I awoke in my living room. However, I was now upright, gliding seamlessly across the floor. I looked down, realizing that I was not walking, but instead floating towards my bathroom. Upon this realization, I also recognized that I was not asleep, and was consciously thinking to myself, I am floating. A series of emotions ran through me: confusion, fear, as well as excitement as to what was happening to me. But these feelings were tempered, and although I didn't understand why, I felt helpless to do anything to stop it. The bathroom was cold and dark, visibility possible due to the dim light coming from the plug-in by the sink. Although I have no memory of putting the toilet seat down, I found myself sitting on it, confused. I thought to myself, what am I doing here? As I looked up there in front of me, what was commonly known as a gray. It was standing, slightly taller than me, as I sat, staring at me stoically with its huge, unblinking eyes. Startled, my regretful reaction was to raise my hand up as if to hit it. My arm was instantly and simultaneously stopped and lowered in a series of short jerks. I immediately thought, it is controlling my body, and shortly thereafter realized that although I should have felt more afraid, I wasn't. I then thought to myself, it has subdued my emotions as well. I felt a little giddy about what was happening. I did not verbally speak, nor did it, but I remember thinking it knew exactly what I was thinking and proceeded with its agenda with astute purpose. I recall getting into the bathtub for some reason, but my memory after that is vague and muddled. I presume this is when it performed whatever experiment or procedure it came to do. When I awoke, I instantly felt a rush of fear and excitement, and also, oddly, a bit sad as well. My memories were indeed confirmed, by the way. I'm a notoriously bad sleeper, and because of a painful back injury, and I never sleep prone. I had real sense of missing time and being a bit groggy. When I went to the bathroom, everything seemed in place, outside of the fact that the shower curtain was not only pulled back completely, but wet as well. Left only with this most vivid memory that I wanted to share, but found often that when I did, it only brought odd silence and strange looks. Assurances that it was only a dream. But it was not a dream. Number 2, aliens or sleep paralysis. Next, we have a story of a woman who woke up one night only to begin levitating as aliens attempted to take her away. As she tells it, I had woken up in my bed feeling completely normal, and I wasn't able to move. After I had felt that initial panic, I began to try and move, and it was possible. It was just very difficult. I remember being able to get my knees up to my chest and roll over onto my side and get my feet onto the ground, and I remember being able to feel like the cold floorboards underneath my feet. After that happened, I remember seeing a bright light coming through my window. Everything began to buzz and vibrate, and I could see my bedroom door swing open, and 3 tall black silhouettes kind of floated into my room. I had seen them looking at me from beside my bed. They looked very angry. After that, my jaw had stretched open. Everything was still buzzing and vibrating, and I began to get lifted up towards my ceiling. After that, I remember fighting it really hard, because the first thing that came to my mind obviously was, I'm getting abducted by aliens. Like it was the only thing that made sense to me at that moment. And after I'd gotten lifted up towards my ceiling, I remember my nose touching my ceiling. I got snapped back into bed, and that's where I woke up, feeling extremely nauseous. I ran to my bathroom, throwing up. I had bruises all over my legs and thighs. Number 1. Yet another abduction. For our final entry, we have a video from 2010. The story behind it is that a woman claimed to her husband that aliens were trying to abduct her. Her husband set up a camera, paranormal activity style, to put her mind at ease, and captured this bizarre footage. In the video, the husband is on the left and the wife on the right, sleeping under a duvet. The duvet on the wife's side is lifted up but then falls flat on the bed, giving the appearance that she has vanished. After 12.5 minutes time, the duvet again lifts up very high, and when it settles, the mother is once again visible. They were not able to extract the footage from the infrared camera, so they played the footage on a monitor which they filmed. Does this footage really show a woman being taken by aliens, or is there some other simpler explanation?
Betty and Barney Hill. Well, it only makes sense to start off today with the most obvious answer. The Hills were a married couple that lived in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. The UFO sighting happened at around 10:30 p.m. on September 19th of 1961, when the duo were driving back to their home in Portsmouth from a vacation in Niagara Falls and Montreal. Welcome to Canada. Just south of Lancaster, Betty noticed a bright point of light in the sky that moved from below the moon and the planet Jupiter upwards to the west of the moon. While Barney was driving, Betty reasoned that she was observing a falling star. Only, it was moving up. Because it moved erratically and grew bigger and brighter, Betty convinced Barney to stop the car for a closer look. Barney obliged and stopped at a picnic area just south of Twin Mountain. By this point, Betty had dug out her binoculars for a closer look and described seeing an odd-shaped aircraft flashing multicolored lights travel across the face of the moon, believing it to be a flying saucer based off of stories she'd heard from her sister. The Hills said they continued driving on the isolated road, moving very slowly in order to observe the object as it came even closer. At one point, the object passed above a restaurant and signal tower on top of Cannon Mountain and came out near the Old Man of the Mountain. Betty later testified that it was at least 1.5 times the length of the granite cliff profile, which was 40 feet long, and that it seemed to be rotating. At one point, the object descended rapidly towards her vehicle, causing Barney to stop in the middle of the highway. The huge silent craft hovered about 80 to 100 feet above the Hills' 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air and filled the entire field of view in the windshield. Carrying his pistol in his pocket, Barney stepped away from the vehicle and moved closer to said object, which he later said was roughly the size of a huge pancake. And that statement right there just made me hungry. Still using the binoculars, Barney claimed to have seen 8 to 11 humanoid figures peering out of the craft's windows, seeming to look at him. In his report to investigator Walter Webb of the National Investigations Community on Aerial Phenomena, NICAP, Barney described specifically that the beings were somehow not human. In unison, all but one figure moved to what appeared to be a panel on the rear wall of the hallway that encircled the front portion of the craft, kind of like a patio. The one remaining figure continued to look at Barney and communicated a message telling him to stay where you are and keep looking. Barney had a recollection of observing the humanoid forms wearing glossy black uniforms and black caps. Red lights on what appeared to be batwing fins began to telescope out of the sides of the craft, and a long structure descended from the bottom of the craft. The silent aircraft approached what Barney estimated was within 50 to 80 feet overhead and 300 feet away from him. Not arriving home till dawn, the Hills stated that they had some odd sensations and impulses they couldn't explain. Now, if you're wondering what happened next, don't worry, so were they. They tried to reconstruct what exactly happened the night before, but their memories were incomplete and fragmented. After sleeping for a couple of hours, Betty awoke and placed her shoes and clothing that she'd worn during the drive into her closet, observing that the dress was torn at the hem, zipper, and lining, and later noticed a pinkish powder on said dress. Over the years, 5 different laboratories have conducted chemical and forensic analyses on the dress, and they got nothing. This wasn't the only damage to items in their possession. Barney said that the leather strap for the binoculars was torn, but didn't remember how. The toes of his shoes were scraped, and their watches were broken, and no matter what, they never worked again. There were shiny concentric circles, similar to the rings you would find on a tree trunk, on their car's trunk that had not been there the previous day. Betty and Barney experimented with a compass, noting that when they moved it close to the spots, the needle would whirl rapidly. But when they moved it a few inches away from the shiny spots, it would drop down. So 10 days after the UFO encounter, Betty began having a series of vivid dreams, which continued for 5 successive nights. She stated that she experienced them with a degree of detail and intensity that she had never had before. After the 5th night, the dream stopped and never recurred, but they occupied her thoughts during the day. Determined to recover their lost memories, the Hills opted to partake in hypnosis sessions. Barney recalled driving the car away from the UFO, but afterwards he felt compelled to pull off the road and drive into the woods, eventually spotting 6 men standing on the dirt road. The car stalled and 3 of the men approached the car, telling Barney, "Don't fear us." He was still anxious, however, and he reported that the leader told him to close his eyes. While hypnotized, Barney said, "I feel like the eyes had pushed into my eyes," a statement he would repeat each session. The best anyone has been able to rebut what happened was claiming sleep deprivation as the cause of what they saw and experienced. Oh, and by the way, when she was still recollecting everything, Betty was able to write out an entire star system that wouldn't be discovered for another 40 plus years. Mind-boggling. I'll admit, I'm usually much more of a skeptic, but this seems pretty dang real to me. Number 4, a great alien abduction. Grant Rollins, a resident of suburban Maryland, described himself as a fairly normal bachelor, living in peace until this all went down in December of 2017. He woke up at 1:30 in the morning to the sound of a break-in and went to the bedroom door to confront the intruder, but was suddenly rendered unconscious as he touched the doorknob. He woke up naked and cold in a pill-shaped glass container. The lid was open, so he was able to stumble out onto the floor around said container and described feeling sluggish and barely able to walk, but he thought he'd been kidnapped, so he was urgently trying to find an escape route. The room he was in was made of mostly concrete and plastic with fluorescent lights. He managed to limp into a hallway that was tunnel-shaped and followed a blue glow coming from down said hall. As he walked, he came out of the tunnel and entered a large cylindrical room lined with vehicles on hooks along the walls. They were human vehicles, mostly Japanese and German cars and motorcycles, but some vehicles were clearly from the American military. In the center of the room was what looked like a metal tree that was 6 stories tall with glowing blue leaves. As Grant stumbled closer, he realized the tree was actually a large metal cylinder, and the leaves were capsules similar to the one he'd woken up in, except these still had people inside them and were radiating a neon blue glow. As he paid more attention to higher up in this tree, Grant noticed some blue wires moving about in the dark areas towards the ceiling. These clumps of wires suddenly floated down towards him and turned to reveal that they had faces in them, each with 2 large dark eyes and narrow slits for noses and mouths. He's compared them in appearance to the typical gray alien face from popular media, with 2 of the faces frowning and 1 smiling. Grant passed out once again, waking up later face down in a puddle of his own drool on a glass floor. He was too tired to get up and was barely able to tilt his head up just enough to take a look around. The room was circular, about 150 square feet in size, and a bright, sterile white color. One of the tentacled creatures was in the room, but was busy facing away and operating a set of strange controls with no buttons or levers. Out of exhaustion, Grant's head fell back down, and through the glass floor saw that they had risen out of a deep black hole that was dug into a grassy plain, where a rock-shaped lid closed around the hole to cover it. This is when he realized he was in a spacecraft, and had actually been in a silo of some sort that's here on Earth somewhere. Grant passed out for the last time and was awoken by the sensation of being dropped back into his bed with a hard thud. He checked his phone for the time and saw that it was now 6:30 in the morning. Later that day, he found an object that had been inserted and cauterized into his right leg and experienced a run-in with some men in black suits within 4 days of said abduction. Number 3, alien births. There are a plethora of cases floating around this World Wide Web related to alien abductions, but this encounter of a 24-year-old Australian woman is something else. Megan Liker married her college friend Andrew Mayer in May of 2001. Their marriage was going really well, so they decided, we want to conceive. But despite the couple's best efforts, Megan was unable to do so. So the couple went to see many doctors, who asked her to undergo a lot of medical tests. The results showed that Megan had the body of an extremely old woman, and her reproductive organs were unable to function properly as they were deteriorated due to multiple pregnancies. As per the report, her uterus was as old as that of a 60-year-old woman. Now these reports stunned the couple, but Megan was confident that she had never become pregnant in her lifetime. So they're confused, they don't know what to do next. Now one of her doctors stated that she could maybe get some answers by undergoing a lot of sessions of regressive hypnosis. She's like, yeah, why not, I'll do anything. And under the influence of said hypnosis, she stunned physicians with a remarkable account of her life. She revealed that once while walking through a municipal park, she noticed a UFO hovering above her. She tried to run away from it after it got too close, but suddenly felt herself being lifted up by a beam of light from inside the craft. After that, she felt dizzy and eventually passed out. Later, after regaining consciousness, she realized she was in a total pitch black room, no noise, very silent, which kind of scared her. She screamed and called out for help, but no one came to her aid. Using her sense of touch, Megan realized that she was in a small room with perfectly smooth walls and flooring. A flare of light illuminated the room, and then she saw the shadows of the people for the first time in a while. The shadows were of 2 small extraterrestrial creatures who asked her to get up. They were no taller than Megan's shoulders, with enormous heads, thin arms and legs, and enormous dark eyes. Then she was brought to a room that seemed like a surgical operating theater. After what seemed to be a preliminary medical checkup, the aliens put her in a room that had see-through walls, floors, and ceilings. There were also other abductees, directly located to her right and left, as well as below and above her. After a period of about 2 weeks, her stomach started to expand, and after a little more than a couple of months, Megan gave birth to her first alien spawn. During the process of giving birth, there were a number of different aliens there who stood and examined her as she writhed in front of them. And as soon as her spawn was delivered, he was whisked away from his mother without delay. Megan claims that hybrids seemed quite similar to humans, except that their eyes are much larger. Ignore my big eyes. After some time had passed, the examination in the operating room was carried out once more, and then another pregnancy came after that, and then another, and then another. Apparently this occurred over the course of roughly 4 years. During that time, she gave birth to around 48 offspring. After that, she became infertile and was no longer of interest to aliens. Hence, she was brought back to Earth, and all of her memories of alien abduction were erased. The memories were replaced with the memory that Megan served in the Army under a contract for those 4 years. But the Australian Ministry of Defence, where she had subsequently applied, stated that they never had such an employee, and they considered that Megan was maybe just crazy. Number 2, an abduction in Oregon. Back in 1967, Loretta Robertson was driving to Portland and had pulled over at a rest stop to take a nap when she heard a diesel vehicle pull up next to her. Trust me, you know what a diesel vehicle sounds like. A little later, she heard another one, but this time felt like it was on top of her, and all she could do was just sort of cover her head in horror. There was a pressure on her head, and a greenish-white light hit her feet and shocked the heck out of her. And that's, well, when she got beamed up, for lack of a better word. I remember feeling like she was seated on something, but couldn't open her eyes out of fear. She could feel the acceleration of going straight up, but couldn't feel any surroundings and can't remember any smells. She blacked out after that and woke up the next morning in her car and had to pull sticky items off of her skin, especially around her abdomen. There was a round unknown stuck to her stomach that didn't have legs and was the size of a jawbreaker, and when she crushed where it was attached to her skin, redness poured out. Her mouth felt like it was full of gravel, and she had a mysterious hole in her tooth that couldn't be explained by science. Number 1, the end of a relationship. Derek Ramsey witnessed an abduction back in 2006 when he was only 20. His story begins after a dinner with his girlfriend at the time and her mom, grandma, and younger sister. He was on his way out of the house, heading through the kitchen to the front door, when he saw 2 creatures leading the younger sister towards said front door. They were both small in size with long arms and a long neck and wore tight black jumpsuits, and Derek found himself frozen in shock as he watched them walk straight through the wall. There was an additional taller creature with a scaly brown face, wearing a robe with a hood over its head, and apparently looked similar to a lizard. He emerged from the bedroom where the other 2 were, leading the way for the younger sister. After that, his brain lost all memory until the next morning when he woke up in his girlfriend's room. The sister was spotted by neighbors, laying nude and unconscious in the front yard that same night. When he told his girlfriend everything he saw, she let him know that it was a regular occurrence and a family secret, which is why the dad had left the family unit years before. The duo continued to date for a little over a year after the first occurrence, but finally broke up. They did keep in touch for several years, and the strange happenings only got more and more intense. And that brings us to the end of our time, and I feel like I'll be keeping a close eye out for weird stuff in the sky from here on out.
Starting at number 5 is the abduction of Frederick Valentic. It all began on the evening of October 21st, 1978. The 20-year-old Australian pilot took off from Moorabbin Airport in Melbourne, embarking on a routine flight in a single-engined Cessna 182L, a plane he's flown countless times in the past. Frederick departed for a training flight to King Island over the Bass Strait between the Australian mainland and Tasmania. However, what began as an ordinary flight soon turned into a bone-chilling encounter with the unknown. As Valentic flew over the Bass Strait, he reported to air traffic control that an unidentified aircraft was following him. He fearfully described the object as having 4 bright lights and flying at unfathomable speeds. Air traffic control attempted to identify the mysterious craft, but could find no evidence of any other aircraft in the vicinity. The situation took a grim turn when Valentic's communication became increasingly distressed, and he reported that the unidentified craft was orbiting him from above. He described the UFO's appearance as metallic and shiny, and praised its maneuverability. It was then that his communications would abruptly cut, with the last thing heard from him being, "It's not an aircraft." Just before the communications were cut off, a loud metallic scraping was heard from Frederick's radio. Neither him nor his aircraft were ever seen again. Speculation around Valentic's disappearance quickly spread, with theories ranging from mundane explanations such as pilot error, mechanical failure, or deliberate disappearance, to the more sensational ones involving extraterrestrial encounters. Based on the information we have, all signs point to Frederick being abducted by some sort of malevolent aliens. The reported scraping noise heard before his communications were cut, likely the sounds of the pilot's aircraft being stuffed into a UFO. The true fate of Frederick Valentic remains a mystery, but the Australian government has assumed him dead after spending many long hours searching for the missing pilot. Where do you think he might be? Let us know in the comments. Moving on, we have number 4, Travis Walton. One fateful night, November 5th, 1975. The Apache Sitgreaves National Forest in Arizona, USA. Travis Walton, a 22-year-old logger, and his crew were returning home after a long day of hard work when they noticed some sort of metallic, glowing disc in the sky. Curious to see what it was, Walton and crew drove closer to the flying object. Once they got close enough to investigate, the forestry worker left the car to get a closer look and approached the hovering craft. Witness accounts vary on exactly what transpired, but the consistent chilling detail was that a bright blue-green beam of light suddenly emanated from the UFO, striking Travis and sending him flying several feet backwards, knocking him unconscious. Seeing this, his crew immediately fled the scene, assuming the blast of light killed Walton, leaving him behind. And before you go in the comments calling Walton's friends fake, don't worry. They returned a few minutes later, only to find that both Travis and the UFO had vanished. The crew was quick to report the incident to the local authorities, and a massive search operation was launched to find Travis Walton. No matter how hard anyone looked, nobody could find him. That was until 5 days later. Travis would reappear, disoriented and confused, in Heber, Arizona, nearly 30 miles away from the original abduction site. But the story he had to tell of the intervening days is the truly chilling part of this tale. According to Travis, after being struck by the beam of light, he awoke aboard an alien spacecraft. He described encountering beings he could only describe as humanoid, but with large bald heads and enormous black wraparound eyes. He reported undergoing a grueling medical examinations and being surrounded by strange technology aboard the craft. During his captivity, Travis experienced some form of telepathic communication with the beings, claiming that they conveyed a sense of curiosity and concern, as if they were studying him. Despite all of this, Travis said that he never felt physically harmed by the entities. After what seemed like mere hours to Travis, he found himself back on Earth, disoriented and unsure of where he was and unaware of how much time had elapsed. Travis Walton's encounter with aliens remains one of the most infamous abduction stories of all time, and has certainly earned its place on this list. Next up at number 3 is the many abductions of Russ Kellet. And yes, that's right, you heard many. In fact, Russ Kellet, a 58-year-old man from North Yorkshire, claims he's been abducted upwards of 60 times. And those are just the ones he remembers. The first time Kellet was abducted was when he was 16, when he was traveling home on his motorcycle until he saw a strange tunnel that he'd never seen before. Curious, he drove through the tunnel being faced with a bright light, and then the next thing he remembers is lying down on an operating table, surrounded by 15 feet tall alien men. He related their appearance to Dracula, minus the fangs. Kellet reported that the Dracula doppelgangers pushed a tube down his throat and pumped a mysterious liquid into him. He claims made him a super soldier. He recalls checkered rooms and special glass orbs used to control the navigation of spaceships, and has made several sketches of the parts of his abductions he remembers. Ever since that first abduction, Russ would battle in a multitude of intergalactic wars and conflicts, so he claims, having fought all sorts of different aliens, such as one race of aliens called the Dragos, which are tall and scaly and have dragon-like heads. After the aliens are satisfied with his work, they wipe his memory and send him back to Earth. These missions would vary in length, between lasting for days to lasting for years. However, from the perspective of us on Earth, he is only gone for hours at a time. His explanation for this was that time moves differently on the planets he's sent to fight on, where a day on one planet could be mere seconds on Earth. Skeptics were quick to dismiss Russ's accounts of his second life as an alien super soldier, but he claims he has proof. Last year, Russ was able to capture footage of what he says are several UFOs, the same ones that have been abducting him and taking him to the corners of space to fight space wars. Whether or not his outlandish story is true is for you to decide, but me personally, I'm not signing up to be drafted for any intergalactic wars. Finishing off at number 1 is the Berkshire County incident on the night of September 1st, 1969 in Berkshire County, Massachusetts. Multiple witnesses reported a series of UFO sightings and encounters. Residents all over the town recount seeing a UFO flying above and around Berkshire County, with statements remaining consistent with one another, making this one of the most plausible UFO abduction stories of all time. The most significant incident relating to this UFO involved two separate families who claimed to have experienced a close encounter with the unidentified craft. According to the witnesses' accounts, around 9 p.m., Tom Reed, a 9-year-old boy, was driving through the woods with his mother, grandmother, and younger brother. Suddenly, they would see a bright object descending from the sky. In response, Tom's mother stopped the car and they watched the object, which was about 40 feet in diameter, hover above the ground. Then, the next thing the family remembered was being in a different location entirely. They claimed that they were now about a mile down the road and the UFO was gone. The family would go on to report that in the following years, they experienced recurring nightmares and strange encounters, suggesting possible ongoing contact with the extraterrestrial entities. Other families in the town reported similar occurrences and UFO sightings around the same time. Over the years, the incident gained attention and underwent various investigations by UFO researchers and enthusiasts. Many try to explain the strange event as natural phenomena or mass misidentification, but the fact that so many people reported the same thing, it's hard not to believe them. This is the first time an entire town has been affected by alien intervention at the same time, and remains the most frightening cases of abduction due to its sheer scale alone.
5. The Yautja. In most movies or stories, aliens abduct humans to run tests on them, to harvest us for our DNA, for resources, scary things that we do to animals on our planet. But that's not how the Yautja of the Predator franchise play. They could give a damn about science, DNA, technology, any of that really. It's solely about the ritualistic, honorable act of the hunt and pulling your spine out. Now normally the Yautja seem to like coming in on our turf to hunt, as shown in Prey and Predator 1 and 2, but hey, just like you and me, the Yautja get lazy every now and again and turn to galactic Uber Eats and order in. In the severely underrated third installment in the franchise, Predators, a group of berserk Yautja abduct a group of wayward humans, mostly mercenaries, to serve as their prey on their home planet. Sort of like when, royals and like nobles bring a bunch of like foxes and ducks to shoot on their property. Now the Yautja, they're pretty honorable, all things considered, even under these conditions, so if you're a bona fide badass, maybe be able to take them on and survive, but if you're just too pathetic, they do let you go. But most of us, the odds are pretty poor that we're gonna win the 1v1 in a martial combat against a creature who treats hunting people as a rite of passage. I would say the odds are very poor that if you were abducted by the Predators, anything nice would happen. Assuming they do see you worthy as a fair fight, they pull no stops to ensure victory, blades sharper than yours, laser cannons, physically imposing strength, and if all else fails, a bomb when they die as a last resort, so all that hullabaloo about honor and the code is kind of made up. And if they deem you unworthy of fighting you, and they let you go, that's like way worse to me, because that's just an ego blow. Like, come on, I'm worthy of hunting. Anyway, if you're looking for more stories about aliens, fictional or not fictional, we've got loads of that on the channel and then some. Seriously, type UFO into the search bar, you will see lots and lots. We got something for you to watch all night. But if you're not subscribed already or yet, you should. So hit subscribe, make sure you hit that bell so you don't miss a single video of ours, but do that at the end of this video, because I got 4 more alien abductors coming up for you right now. Coming up next is the Collectors from the Mass Effect series. Mass Effect is one of the best video game trilogies of all time if you don't consider all 3 games being good and important quality in a trilogy. Now the Milky Way of the Mass Effect series is filled to bursting with all these cool, colorful, and innovative, inventive aliens that all speak in pleasant English dialects, but few are as mysterious and terrifying as the Collectors. Their name kind of buries the lead, to be honest. The Collectors make them out, it kind of sounds like they're gonna be cute. Like they're just super into mint in box Funko Pops. I wish. The Collectors are an insectoid, enigmatic species that live on the edge of the galaxy who get their name for their propensity of collecting and dealing in odd livestock. 12 left-handed members of one alien species, a collection of aliens with differently colored eyes, you name it. Now when we get to them in Mass Effect 2, they've become very occupied with collecting humans en masse. Not just 1 or 2, they abduct entire planets at a time to the deaf ears of the Council, who are ignorant to the threat. The Collectors are revealed to be servants of the Reapers, the ultimate villain of the Mass Effect series, an eldritch threat of sentient starships from beyond the Veil. So what are the collectors doing with all their human collections? Posing them in cool little scenes? Well, we discover about halfway through the game that they've been juicing humans, for lack of a better word, into a pulpy, thick, viscous substance they used to distill humanity for their genetic material to craft into a new species, a humanoid reaper, which looks pretty horrifying. Looks like this. It's the kind of synthetic nightmare that James Cameron would probably love. In the game proper, if you're too late to rescue the crew of your starship, the Normandy, you get to see the horrifying process as you watch your crew get juiced to fuel up the human reaper. Shouldn't have spent all that time playing Kesar at the Citadel, buddy. Should have focused on your work. Number 3, the Borg. The Borg is a terrifying and one of, if not the most iconic antagonist in Star Trek history. Maybe some Trekkies in the comments can argue that maybe it's the Klingons. I think it's the Borg personally, but that's just me. They're a cybernetic species driven by a collective hive mind, seeking to assimilate other races into their collective consciousness. I feel like there's actually a probably good chance they might get along with the collectors. I feel like they got similar goals. The Borg operate as a collective entity, with each individual drone interconnected through cybernetic implants and linked to a central intelligence known as the Borg Queen. And they're kind of like bugs, kind of like ants that wasn't coming across. Their primary objective is to achieve perfection through the assimilation of other species. They forcibly incorporate individuals into their collective, stripping away their individuality and memories and turn them into drones. Now this sounds pretty harsh, but you do get to have like an iPad glued to your face and you look pretty cool, so it's not all bad. The Borg really don't believe in things like emotion. You can't reason with them or talk them down, much as Picard might try. Their catchphrase, resistance is futile, really sums up their mantra and sort of views on life. They have a vast network of ships and drones. They know they're going to overpower you and assimilate you into the Borg, and that's their sole drive, so why even bother fighting? They know they're going to win. Cold, calculated, efficient. You gotta love it. Now, if you were to be assimilated into the Borg ship, I actually don't think it would be that pleasant. I can't imagine the process of being forcibly converted into a cyborg would be enjoyable while it's happening. Afterwards, maybe, once you get acclimated to your new RoboCop body. Plus, once you're part of a cold, unfeeling machine focused solely on assimilation, you don't gotta worry about the wants, the needs, or the overwhelming stress of individualism. You might even find that you enjoy being part of a collective, Nothing to worry about. And it's not a totally irreversible process, Captain Picard was reversed in a process that left him totally fine and harboring absolutely no mental damage or scars whatsoever. So you know what? I'm sounding it out. The Borg sound awesome. I would Borg up in a heartbeat. I would love to live in a big space cube. Number 2, Roger's species. I am a huge fan of American Dad. I never thought I would be talking about American Dad on a scary channel. I don't think I should even be talking about it now, but here we are. If you're a really keen dadder, maybe you've noticed that there's been a minuscule American Dad reference in almost every single one of my video intros when I tell you to dive on in. I think it's one of the funniest animated sitcoms ever made, and that's in no small part thanks to Roger, who is one of the most heinously offensive, funny characters ever put to screen. He's a hedonist, he's debaucherous, and he gets away with unimaginable, horrible things that any other fictional character wouldn't, but Roger's an alien, so I guess it's okay. Roger's part of an alien species that looks like the traditional little greys that you see in pop culture and in like little souvenir shops around Roswell. His species is shown to be fairly innovative, as he's got all manner of gizmos and gadgets at his disposal whenever the episode calls for it, suggesting his species is very technologically advanced. Now, throughout the series, we never really get too much of a glimpse at Roger's home life or his species or his backstory. We know that he got sent down to Earth years ago as part of the Roswell incident to serve as a crash test dummy, but it isn't until all the way in the show's 8th season that we finally get a look at Roger's home planet, where it's revealed that his entire species lives on a giant space station that's been modeled to look like a 90s shopping mall. Roger's species travels the galaxy, abducting people of all manner of species, and makes them work out the rest of their days at a food court pop-up of a food representing that species. For humanity, we are delegated to shawarma representing us, which I have to be honest, if I was going to narrow the human experience to a single food, that's a damn good one to pick. I've never met a shawarma I didn't like. We see all of this happen through the eyes of Jeff, the perpetually red-eyed slacker of the Smith family, who after a dupe by Roger finds himself abducted, serving them dutifully as a shawarma cook. Now, it sounds like it might be okay as far as fates go, condemned to working the grill at a food court. That's something someone right now is doing. But as part of this condemnation, because the alien emperor ruling their species was heartbroken, he forbids any and all love on the spaceship, right down to taking a particularly special organ off your body, if you can kind of read between the lines there. So if the life of a eunuch and serving fast food in space doesn't sound that bad, then yeah, it's not such a bad deal. But if you're not a fan of those things, it's a pretty horrible life to be doomed to. And finally, coming in at number 1 for this list is going to be the horrific unknown aliens from Prey. That's the 2006 video game called Prey, not the 2007 video game called Prey. That's also about being on an alien spaceship, but not at all related to the 2006 video game. And both of these things are totally unrelated to the 2022 film Prey, which is about the Predator. Are you following me? I'll throw in one more Prey for you. You might not remember Prey, and even if you did remember it, it can't be purchased at all, making this odd relic a bit of lost media, which is kind of why I wanted to talk about it, shine a little light on it. Prey was interesting for more than a couple reasons. Number 1, you played a Cherokee character who is surprisingly not a walking stereotype. He's voiced by an actual indigenous actor. It's pretty rare for any indigenous character, really. Second, Prey might genuinely be one of the most horrifying games ever released, and gotta be one of the most traumatizing, scary depictions of an alien abduction in maybe any piece of media ever. I know I'm hyperbolizing a bit, but man, Prey made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The opening of the game captures the vibe of an abduction, like, perfectly. I wouldn't know, I've never been abducted. One moment you're in a roadhouse in Arizona, the next you, your grandfather, and girlfriend are all sucked up and carried away in a horrifying industrial factory line that really dehumanizes the abductees, treating them like nothing more than meat. As you watch in gut-wrenchingly horrifying detail as your grandfather is processed into chunky salsa before your very eyes while you're helpless to stop it. I remember watching the demo for Prey when I was a young scrapper, and a full 17 years later, I still remember every second of this brutal intro in crystal clear HD, like burned into my retinas. Now, the aliens in Prey are pretty simple. We don't ever get to learn what their name is or what their deal really is, but we know they come down to the planets and they harvest the local inhabitants to make them into soldiers for their army or juice them for nutrients, or sometimes a flirty little combination of both. In-game, we see several enemies that are made of the aliens' twisted experiments and merging meat with metal. Suffice to say, no part of their abduction process looks pleasant. At best, you get juiced quickly. At worst, they turn you into a horrifying little machine servant. Now, Prey is definitely a bit more of an unknown game, since I mentioned earlier, unless you already own a physical copy, you can't play it. I wouldn't say it's an amazing game. We're not missing out too much. The actual mechanics are pretty basic, save for some really cool tech stuff involving portals and casting your spirit outside of your body. But the visuals and atmosphere of Prey are some of the most unpleasant and terrifying out there. I really would recommend looking up a playthrough of it if you're interested. There's stuff in Prey that is so hardcore you literally cannot depict it in video games anymore. ESRB really frowns on some of that stuff, and you better believe YouTube guidelines does as well. That's why we're dancing around some of these words.